What if I told you that the greatest theft in your life has never been about money, status, or opportunity, but about your energy? The silent exhaustion that follows you at night, the heaviness that greets you in the morning, doesn't come from your work alone. It comes from invisible leaks in your soul, from giving yourself away in fragments, from chasing after people who never valued the gift of your attention, from being available to every noise, but never present with your own heart. And you've felt it, haven't you? That quiet resentment that builds when you say yes while your entire being screams no. That subtle despair of realizing you are more invested in other people's lives than they ever were in yours. We call it kindness, loyalty, sacrifice. But what if it's not? What if it's self-abandonment dressed in virtue? Energy is sacred. Once drained, no one can restore it for you. You are not a machine that simply refills when plugged into another person's approval. You are a universe, and every time you let someone pull you without boundaries, a star inside you fades. The real question is not who drains you, but why do you allow it? Most of us live with a quiet but dangerous misconception about what it means to love, to care, and to belong. We grow up in cultures that glorify sacrifice, that praise the one who gives without measure, and that shame the one who dares to draw a line. Somewhere along the way, we internalize the belief that our worth is directly tied to how much of ourselves we can pour into others. We are told that good people endure, that loyalty means silence, and that respect means swallowing discomfort for the sake of harmony. But beneath this conditioning lies an invisible theft, the theft of energy. Every time we dismiss our own needs to accommodate someone else, we slowly dissolve pieces of our identity. It looks harmless on the outside, staying late for a friend who never shows up, listening endlessly to someone's complaints, saying yes to commitments that quietly suffocate us, yet the cost is steep. Our vitality slips away not in storms, but in drops, so subtle we don't notice until the well runs dry. Carl Jung often spoke of individuation, the lifelong process of becoming who you truly are. To become whole, one must embrace the self fully, shadows included, instead of dissolving into the expectations of others. Yet this is precisely where the conflict arises. We have been taught that boundaries equal selfishness, that saying no equals cruelty, and that prioritizing inner peace equals weakness. And so, rather than stepping into the terrifying but liberating act of owning ourselves, we default to patterns of appeasement. It feels safer to be drained than to risk rejection. It feels easier to lose ourselves than to face the accusation of being unkind. The irony, however, is that by denying our truth, we harm not only ourselves, but also the very people we think we are protecting. A fractured self cannot sustain authentic connection. Think about how often we equate love with endurance. A partner disrespects us, yet we stay because we tell ourselves that leaving would mean failure. A family member continuously oversteps and we justify it with blood ties. A workplace exploits our dedication and we smile through exhaustion because we fear being called ungrateful. These are not small acts of compromise, they are betrayals of the self. And when repeated, they carve deep grooves into our psychology. We begin to mistake depletion for virtue, mistaking our silent suffering as proof of our worth. The world applauds the giver who never stops giving, but behind the applause lies a soul quietly eroding. No one warns us that unchecked empathy often mutates into erosion, or that constant availability can become the heaviest chain. The misconception becomes even more insidious because society rewards it. The nice person is loved. The accommodating friend is always included. The tireless employee is praised. On the surface, these validations look like confirmation that we are doing the right thing. But validation is not nourishment, it's bait. It keeps us trapped in cycles where we depend on external approval for identity. The danger is that we begin to confuse applause for belonging and recognition for love. And in doing so, we tether our energy to forces that will never stop demanding more. The more we give, the more is expected, until we realize too late that we are left with nothing for ourselves. This is not compassion. This is self-neglect, institutionalized by cultural praise. Psychologically, the toll manifests as quiet resentment. We start to notice subtle irritations, the sigh after another unreturned favor, the forced smile during conversations that drain us, the heaviness in our chest when someone calls our name. Resentment is the smoke that reveals the fire of self-abandonment. Yet many of us ignore these signs. Convinced that patience is a virtue, we suppress the irritation, only to find it resurfacing as fatigue, anxiety, even bitterness. And here lies another tragedy. By trying so hard to keep peace externally, we create war internally. We silence our truth, yet the body keeps score. It whispers in exhaustion, it screams in burnout, and it pleads in those moments where we wonder why life feels so heavy when we have done everything right. What makes this conflict even more cruel is that it distorts the very essence of love. True love, whether for a partner, a friend, or humanity itself, cannot thrive in the soil of depletion. Love without boundaries is not love. It is dependency, it is performance, it is martyrdom dressed up as virtue. When we give without measure, we don't offer ourselves. We offer a hollowed-out version of ourselves, and no one is truly nourished by that. The misconception tricks us into believing that being endlessly available proves our devotion. In reality, it strips love of its authenticity. What good is a heart that beats for others if it has stopped beating for itself? What good is sacrifice if it leaves behind only shadows of who we used to be? At the core of this struggle is fear. Fear of being alone if we set limits. Fear of being disliked if we say no. Fear of being misunderstood if we claim our space. These fears keep us imprisoned in roles we never consciously chose. We cling to them because we are told that the alternative, living unapologetically, claiming our energy, honoring our boundaries, means selfishness, arrogance, or isolation. But the truth is the opposite. Only when we protect our energy can we give from a place of wholeness. Only when we honor ourselves can we truly honor others. And yet, as long as the misconception rules our minds, we continue to confuse erosion for empathy and silence for love. There comes a time in nearly everyone's life when the subtle cracks in our energy become impossible to ignore. It often begins with small moments, agreeing to attend a gathering when all we wanted was to rest, answering late-night calls that left us drained, or smiling through conversations that felt more like endurance tests than genuine exchanges. These moments pile up quietly until one day we realize that the laughter we force is hollow, and the presence we offer feels like a mask. Deep down, there's a whisper asking, "Why am I always the one who bends? Why do I stay when everything in me is breaking?" It's not dramatic or sudden, but an inner dissidence that grows louder, revealing the truth that what we thought was kindness was in fact slow self-betrayal. Most people recognize these patterns only after years of living them. Think of the endless relationships where one person keeps proving their worth, bending backward for validation, while the other simply receives without effort. At first it seems normal. After all, we are told love is about giving. But over time something shifts. The giver starts to feel unseen, unheard, unappreciated. A seed of bitterness takes root, and even simple gestures begin to feel heavy. The transformation begins not with anger at the other person, but with an awakening inside. I am exhausting myself in places where my soul is starving. This realization can feel like betrayal, because it confronts the illusion we clung to for years. The workplace often mirrors this same dynamic. How many times have you stayed late to meet deadlines that no one else would touch, only to receive little more than passing acknowledgement? How many times have you poured creativity, effort, and emotional labor into a system that rewarded compliance, but never fulfillment? In the beginning, it feels noble, like you are proving yourself, securing a future, earning respect, but eventually the emptiness grows. No title, no paycheck, no performance review can compensate for the quiet erosion of self-worth. And then comes the breaking point. The sudden clarity that no achievement is worth the cost of constantly bleeding your energy into an institution that sees you as replaceable. That is the moment the transformation begins. The courage to say enough. Friendships, too, carry this theme. We've all been in conversations where we nod endlessly, where the other person unloads their storms, but when our turn comes to speak, they are already checking their phone. At first, we excuse it. Maybe they're busy, maybe they care in their own way. But after enough cycles, it becomes impossible to ignore that the relationship is one-sided. Transformation here often looks small but feels radical. declining the next invitation, choosing solitude over empty chatter, or finally saying what we always swallowed, "I can't keep being your anchor while I drown." These are the moments that mark the beginning of self-respect, though society might label them cold or selfish. The emotional shift that follows is both terrifying and liberating. Walking away from what once defined us feels like losing a part of ourselves. There is guilt in canceling a call, in turning down a request, in saying no without explanation. But slowly a new energy emerges. Protecting your time feels less like rebellion and more like survival. Sitting in silence feels less like loneliness and more like communion with yourself. And one day, without fanfare, you realize the heaviness you once carried is gone. This is not abandonment of others. It is the recovery of yourself. The transformation is not about distance, but about alignment. Society rarely applauds these shifts. Instead, people will question your decisions. They will call you distant, cold, difficult. They may accuse you of changing as though growth were a betrayal. Yet beneath their discomfort lies a truth they cannot admit. Your boundaries expose their dependence on your erosion. Transformation unsettles not just you, but everyone who benefited from your silence. And while their resistance can feel like rejection, it is in fact confirmation that you are finally breaking free. To stand firm in your energy, even when misunderstood, is perhaps the deepest act of courage. The heart of transformation is not found in grand gestures, but in quiet revolts. It is in reclaiming mornings that once belonged to obligations. It is in protecting Sunday afternoons like sacred temples. It is in choosing presence with yourself over performance for others. These small acts, repeated consistently, build a new foundation. They teach you that your peace is not negotiable, your worth is not conditional, and your energy is not for sale. In time, these shifts reshape your entire existence. What once felt like sacrifice now feels like strength. What once felt like duty now feels like clarity. And in that clarity, you finally understand. You were never meant to live drained. You were meant to live whole. There comes a point when silence stops feeling like emptiness and begins to feel like medicine. In the beginning, solitude can feel unbearable because we've been conditioned to measure our worth by how connected, how busy, how needed we are. But when we finally step back from the noise, we start to hear something else. The faint sound of our own pulse, the forgotten rhythm of our own breath. This is the first awakening of inner strength, realizing that solitude is not a punishment, but a sanctuary. The quiet we once ran from becomes the ground where our strength grows roots. No applause, no validation, no approval, just the steady reminder that our energy belongs first to us. It is here, in the absence of distraction, that we begin to meet ourselves fully. Strength does not always roar. Sometimes it whispers. It whispers in the decision to close the door when the world demands access. It whispers in the pause before saying yes, in the courage to let silence answer instead of rushing to fill it. This kind of strength feels foreign at first because it does not seek recognition. It is not strength that others celebrate. It is the quiet defiance of no longer living as a vessel for everyone else's storms. Imagine yourself as the sea, vast and unshakable. Waves of expectation may crash against you, tides of manipulation may pull at you, but your depth remains untouched. This is what it means to awaken, to know you are the ocean, not the wave. The scars we carry play a role in this awakening. For years we may have looked at our wounds as proof of failure, weakness, or inadequacy, but the moment we choose to see them differently, everything shifts. Scars are not signs of brokenness. They are signatures of survival. They are the ink of battles that did not destroy us, reminders that even in our most fragile states, we endured. Awakening inner strength often begins when we stop hiding our scars and start wearing them as armor, not to shield us from life, but to remind us that we can face life again and again without losing ourselves. In this light, every hurt becomes proof of resilience, and every fracture becomes a window for light to enter. There is also power in recognizing that self-worth does not need to shout. It doesn't compete, doesn't beg, doesn't demand. True worth glows like a lantern in the dark, steady, humble, and undeniable. You may have walked through years of seeking external validation, clinging to every compliment, fearing every rejection. But once you awaken to your inner worth, those chains begin to dissolve. Suddenly, criticism no longer shakes you. Absence no longer scares you. Silence no longer feels like neglect, it feels like freedom. The strength you carry now comes from within, and nothing outside of you has the power to extinguish it. This is not arrogance. It is clarity. And clarity is the foundation of peace. Awakening also means realizing that giving is only sacred when it flows from abundance, never from emptiness. For too long, many of us believed that to love others meant emptying ourselves, sacrificing until nothing remained. But strength teaches us a different lesson, that the greatest gift we can give is our wholeness, not our depletion. When you pour from a full heart, love expands. When you pour from exhaustion, love corrodes. Inner strength is the ability to pause before giving, to ask, am I offering from fullness or from fear, from freedom or from obligation? This shift transforms every relationship. It purifies our connections, because what we give is no longer born of guilt, but of choice. There is imagery that often accompanies this transformation: light breaking through a cracked wall, a seed pushing through soil, dawn emerging after a long night. These images remind us that strength is not found in perfection, but in persistence. The light doesn't need the wall to disappear. It only needs a crack. The seed doesn't demand the soil to soften. It pushes anyway. Strength grows in the same way, in resistance, in persistence, in quiet determination. It is not about erasing pain or denying weakness. It is about carrying both and choosing to rise regardless. When we awaken to this truth, every scar, every silence, every rejection becomes fuel for growth. And perhaps the deepest realization of all is that strength is not about control. It is about surrender. Not surrender to people or circumstances, but surrender to the truth of who you are. No more fighting to prove yourself. No more scrambling to earn love. No more leaking energy in the pursuit of validation. You are already enough, already whole, already infinite. When this realization settles in your bones, a stillness arises that nothing and no one can shake. You no longer need to chase, explain, or defend. Your presence becomes its own proof, and your energy remains intact. This is the awakening of inner strength, the quiet revolution, where you stop burning like a candle for others and begin to shine like the sun for yourself. The greatest revolution you will ever experience will not be televised, announced, or applauded. It will not happen on a stage, nor will it be validated by those around you. It will happen quietly, in the chambers of your own heart. In the silent moment when you decide that your energy is no longer currency for others to spend. For so long you may have believed that life's purpose was to please, to prove, to perform. You may have mistaken exhaustion for love, self-sacrifice for loyalty, and silence for harmony. But as your eyes open, you begin to see that the true battleground has never been the world outside of you. It has always been the inner war between the self that longs for freedom and the self that fears rejection. Choosing yourself is not rebellion against others. It is reconciliation with your own soul. That moment is not loud, but it is seismic, because it shifts the axis of your entire existence. This revolution is not about distancing yourself from the world, but about engaging with it from a place of wholeness rather than depletion. You are no longer available to every demand, no longer accessible to every manipulation, no longer chained by the guilt that once kept you silent. You begin to guard your mornings, treat your silence as sacred, and see your peace as a non-negotiable birthright. Some will not understand this change. They may resist, they may accuse, they may label you selfish or cold. But their discomfort is not your burden to carry. What you are doing is not cruelty, it is clarity. You are learning that to truly give, you must first belong to yourself. The revolution is not about rejecting people. It is about refusing to reject yourself any longer. This inner transformation dismantles the illusions that once held you captive. You begin to see that outward validation, the applause of crowds, the nods of approval, were never proof of your worth. They were distractions. momentary highs that kept you enslaved to other people's perceptions. When the applause stopped, your identity wavered. But now, as you grow in strength, you understand that the deepest form of freedom is self-confirmation. You no longer need to be seen to know you exist. You no longer need to be praised to know you matter. This realization does not make you arrogant. It makes you whole. It anchors you so deeply in your own truth that you stop being swayed by every passing opinion. You become steady, like a mountain unmoved by winds, glowing quietly with the dignity of someone who no longer needs permission to be. Of course, this shift does not come without grief. There is grief in letting go of identities you spent years building, the yes person, the reliable friend, the tireless worker. There is grief in walking away from people who only loved you when you were convenient for them. There is grief in releasing the old self, the one who believed love had to be earned through depletion. Yet grief is not a sign of weakness. It is proof of growth. Just as the seed must split open to become a tree, you too must break the shell of who you once were. The pain is real, but it is not permanent. On the other side of that pain lies a life lighter, freer, more aligned. And every tear shed in the process becomes water that nourishes your new beginning. When you live from this awakened state, your energy takes on a new quality. You are no longer a candle flickering anxiously in the wind, burning down faster with each demand placed on you. Instead, you become, like the sun, radiant, constant, untouchable. The sun does not apologize for shining. It does not dim itself to make the night comfortable. It simply radiates, and in doing so, gives life. When you embody this, your giving no longer drains you, it expands you. Love flows without fear. Boundaries exist without guilt. Silence feels like strength, not isolation. You stop asking, "What will they think of me?" and start living from the question, "What do I think of myself?" And in that shift, you find liberation. So let this be your revolution. Not a rebellion fought against others, but a gentle, powerful uprising within yourself. Stop handing over your energy like loose change. Stop begging for validation that was never worth the price of your soul. Begin to honor the sanctuary of your being, to live in alignment with your truth, to protect the fire that burns within you. This is the real victory, not in conquering the world outside, but in mastering the world within. Nothing and nobody will ever drain your energy again unless you choose to give them permission. And your call to action is not loud or performative. It is quiet, sacred, and eternal. Choose yourself again and again until your life becomes the reflection of the freedom you once only dreamed of.